SBC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
Welcome back to iGaming Daily. We hope you all had a great Christmas break and a good new year. So, as we get started with January, we're going to take a look back on some late-breaking news from 2024, which carries some intriguing narratives for proceedings for the UK gambling industry, in particular, in 2025. But before we get into all of this, a quick word for our sponsor, Optimove. Optimove is the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. So, to start with, the NHS issued a warning on festive temptations, as they put it, leading to some public anxiety around problem gambling. However, some eyebrows were raised at the NHS's tone and messaging around gambling, particularly as it prepares to take on some very important forthcoming responsibilities as the Chief Commissioner for the Treatment of Problem Gambling and Gambling Harm in 2025. Elsewhere, there's also been a cooling off period for industry deal makers, as lottery giant Allwyn announced the $300 million investment to acquire a 51% stake in Novibet, in doing so, further diversifying its business. So we had the M&A bells ringing late in 2024, but what does this tell us about upcoming deals and valuations in 2025? I'm Ted Orme-Claye, one of SBC's editors, and I'm joined by my fellow editor and fellow Ted Menmuir once again. The boys are back in 2025 to talk about some of these big topics. So, how's it going, Ted? How was your Christmas and New Year? Lots of festivities, lots of fun.
Yes, lots of festive activities. Very busy. Lots of cooking, lots of driving. I did everything this Christmas.
Are you usually the designated cook, Ted?
I'll break that. Yes, I am for the Menmuir household. Yeah, I give my mother a rest. But this year we had the Japanese side of my family visiting, so we increased we doubled head count, and bit of stress, I'd say.
I couldn't have been any more opposite. I had absolutely no cooking responsibilities at all this year. I don't think I cooked for about 8 days straight, to be honest. It's like the laziest I've been in a long while. But, you know, it's Christmas. I've afforded myself some laziness. And now I'm back on healthy living, healthy eating, and, plenty of vegetables. Anyway,
don't worry, Ted. I'll be having words with the Orme-Claye residents.
You want to pass on some of your skills and responsibilities to me, I'm sure.
I'm not saying I'm a good cook. I'm just saying I cooked.
And right, with that out of the way, we'll get on to the NHS story. So, Ted, you broke this for us on SBC News over the Christmas period. I remember this is something that I've covered a little bit in the past, back when I was working on SBC News. Obviously, the NHS is preparing to take on responsibilities as the main provider of problem gambling treatment in the UK, and deciding where fundraising from the RET levy will go, I believe. Could you just give us a bit of a breakdown? In fact, you're updating both the listeners and myself on this one. What was the NHS's statement about, and what was the reaction to it during Christmas?
So on the 27th of December, the NHS England's top physicians, so Dr. Matt Gaskell, who heads the NHS Northern Gambling Service, and Claire Murdoch, who's head of treatment and gambling and treatment services for the NHS, they issued a notice on what was kind of festive anxieties over problem gambling, and particularly in relation to the patient demand for care. And it referenced stats from 2023 about what is essentially the NHS seeing a doubling of almost 20,000 patients referred to gambling treatment support in the past year, or in 2023. So The statement kind of raised eyebrows because it was essentially the kind of NHS's first statement since the decision by the government to transfer the kind of the RET levy over to the NHS and under its domain, in which it will kind of now be the Chief Commissioner of Treatment Services and Treatment Support for UK gambling. And I think kind of people, a lot of kind of observers were kind of taken aback by why it kind of gone with this statement as its lead, and also kind of the wording and the context of it. So using stuff as like a perfect storm of temptation, and also where it was kind of pinpointing in the flaws of treatment support for gambling. So I think we come over the kind of Christmas period to a point where the industry is kind of looking at much closer at the NHS and what it has to say about problem gambling, and it's also trying to get kind of more insights into kind of its development in 2025. And I think this kind of message sent kind of mixed kind of connotations about what it wants or how it's going to proceed with its duties.
So, Ted, taking a look back at this and also taking a look forward, I guess, what do you think the main purpose of the NHS message was? Do you think this was just sort of a public service announcement, cautioning people and warning people about the risks of gambling harm and problem gambling, particularly at this time of year, which is often has a lot more financial burdens involved for a lot of people? Or do you think this was a PR statement, sort of signalling the health services' intent and approach to problem gambling as it prepares to take on this new remit?
You see, I think you're kind of pointing out where the confusion's led. Every kind of Christmas, we do kind of expect a warning or a public service announcement on gambling harms and kind of the exposure to problem gambling during a period of high intensity in football matches and horse racing. However, I think what caught the industry off guard was the way the message was worded. It's reference to stats that were in 2 years old, and also again going back to, we're now entering a period where the structures of treatment support and how gambling harm is researched are going to completely change in 2025. And is this the appropriate message that the NHS should be sending when it is about to become the chief commissioner? Also, I think that, as stated before, there are kind of anxieties all round with kind of wider stakeholders on the kind of the transfer of duties in the problem gambling structure for the UK. So I don't think it was a PR. I don't think it was a public service announcement, but at the same time, I don't think that it was a warning. It was just very confused messaging by top physicians.
Do you think? I know you mentioned the use of some 2 years old stats there. Do you think this kind of highlights the importance that the UK needs a bit? Do you think we need a bit of an upgrade on how we monitor gambling harm and how we record it, in order to better inform how public bodies like the NHS, but then I guess also the Gambling Commission and other agencies like that, approach how this issue can be tackled more efficiently?
Yes, look, I mean, problem gambling will always be the central conflict for the gambling issue, and how that is interpreted is really down to how you convey the stats. Now, part of the issue with that statement was that immediately the UK press kind of gathered on that, as in, oh, these are the NHS's direct concerns. Now, those have been kind of long existed, and I think even the conversation back now has kind of moved on from the stats that they were using to what is applicable and how do we kind of proceed to actually get better treatment and get kind of more direct interventions on problem gambling. It's I've got no problem with a festive a message on anxieties about the festive period. However, I don't think it's reflective of where kind of the stakeholders involved in RET and also in the kind of front line of gambling harm preventions are. So, yes, we need to kind of prioritize kind of better messaging all around for the gaming industry and the challenges it faces. And I just don't think that the NHS did that this Christmas.
There's been a lot of concerns as well. I mean, from what I remember from writing on SBC News about this topic, like about over a year ago now, actually. So maybe my memory is a little hazy. But there were a lot of concerns, weren't there, raised around the time that it got announced that the NHS would be taking on these duties, about whether or not this would be another burden for the health service after years of cutbacks pretty much over a decade, and then after feeling the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as we all know, was quite a difficult period for the NHS. It was very overstretched and dealing with a huge surge in demand. Whether or not, after all this, whether or not the health service is really prepared to take on yet another duty, and one that will require a lot of extensive research and operation of various clinics. I know there's clinics across the UK, and there's plans to open quite a few more of them, is there not? So I get I'm sure those concerns are probably still abounding. And in sort of amidst all of this, how do you think that we'll move forward, both the industry and the government, with monitoring how the NHS sort of develops with regards to the RET levy and its new duty of care on problem gambling?
Look, the NHS got what it asked for. It wanted to be chief commissioner, and it wanted kind of a clear detachment from gaming, and that happened, and that was granted by the government. So I think we're coming into 2025 where that is the kind of first phase of how that structure and how that network will be transformed under its new under the NHS's new guidance, and also its treatment of the kind of structural support offered by third-party partners, and whether that kind of leads to all-round improvements again, and how those kind of improvements are factored in on what conditions. We keep on kind of returning to just, as you're right, what a kind of political animal the NHS is, and the pressures that it's under, and also it's under pressures to feedback figures to on what is essentially a very hard addiction to determine and to kind of process. I think the anxieties are going to be felt this year, and it's going to be kind of a critical phase between the industry and its wider relationships with political organisations such as the NHS and the Gambling Commission.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Welcome back to today's episode of iGaming Daily with myself and Ted Menmuir, the two Teds. And we're here to talk about another dynamic duo, I believe, as the pan-European lottery giant Allwyn has further diversified its business portfolio with an acquisition of Novibet. So, Ted, again, I think you were the one to break this news for us on SBC News over the past couple of weeks. Could you just give us a breakdown of what the dynamics of this deal are and what some of the reactions to it have been?
So yes, no kind of rest period for industry deal making, as on the last day, on the second last day of the year, Allwyn announced that it would proceed with a £330 million investment to acquire 51% stake in Novibet. The deal kind of looks to refresh Allwyn's online gambling portfolio, kind of diversify it further away from lotteries. And it's also an interesting deal because Novibet has been a company that since 2022 has been rumored to either pursuing an IPO or pursuing a merger with another kind of gambling entity. So it's as if kind of its journey is kind of being resolved. It's going to come under kind of Allwyn's ownership, but they are two very kind of different businesses. And I think a lot of eyes will be on kind of how the the integration develops.
What do you think Allwyn's sort of primary objective is here? Because, as we said before, they're traditionally a lottery company, aren't they? I mean, they're obviously one of the biggest developments for them in recent years was securing the operating license for the next 10 years for the UK National Lottery. So what do you think their objectives are here? Do you think we're going to see Allwyn start expanding even more into other areas of the gambling industry, betting and getting gaming in particular, obviously?
Well, I think that's what caught the eye, because this is for Allwyn. This is an all-out investment in the online gambling market. Novibet is Greece's second biggest bookmaker, and I think that what it views in its acquisition is that I think Allwyn is responding to market pressures in which it can no longer just rely on lottery as its principal field. I think even with the larger conglomerates, as we have seen with FDJ, there is a pressure to participate in every market related to gambling. I think Allwyn sees that, and for a £330 million investment, it took it decided to strike on Novibet. These deals are there to be kind of engaged with, and to kind of change the strategy and kind of outlook of these companies. And I think it does that for Allwyn.
I found it an interesting one with Novibet because they obviously spoke to our colleague Martin, I believe it was, for a recent episode of the SPC Leaders magazine, and they were reflecting on some of their past ambitions regarding a public listing. Obviously, now they're going down the route of becoming part of a huge, wider gambling conglomerate. You think that's kind of indicative of how significant M&A can be for a company in its growth ambitions, as in, by being acquired, that being a vehicle for growth, as opposed to securing a listing and gaining more investment through shareholding?
Yeah, I mean, reflecting back on kind of for 2 years, Novibet was prepping up an IPO in 2022 and 2023, and that kind of got cancelled due to kind of, I think, primarily kind of due to more to market changes. However, I think when we look at any deal, any M&A, I think you've got to be reflective of what's happened in the past 12 to 24 months and kind of the changes that the market has seen. I think when Novibet looked at an IPO, I think SPACs were hugely in favor, and they were carrying kind of US money. That market has now changed. I think that partnering with Allwyn, you're getting a company there that has good cash reserves, but that also can extend Novibet to reach towards a higher platform, diversifying its business away more, further from Greece into new markets. Allwyn is the bigger fish. It has big ambitions, and I think that it's another company that has to kind of test its online credentials. I think it can do that through Novibet.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they're definitely securing quite a proven brand in this regard. Quite a solid player in the betting space, in their desire to expand outside of lotteries and get involved in more markets. I know this is something you've already kind of touched on, but as you said, they're two very different companies. How well do you think they'll complement each other? How well do you think they'll get along under this new structure?
I think here we got to kind of really look at Allwyn. Like, yes, Allwyn has grown its business out of M&As, but their strategic M&As have been focused very much on land-based lotteries, and it also has like a lot of moving dynamics, a lot of pressure faced on how it will kind of change or kind of reinterpret the national lottery in the UK. So that's still very much up in the air. It did its first phase integration last year, but still there's a lot of kind of narratives there. Also, them taking on an online business, what are kind of its expectations and ambitions for Novibet, and in which markets it can grow. I think Novibet itself kind of believes that in key markets it has reached its peak. It now needs to kind of find fresh ground. I think that a lot of eyes will be on Allwyn's H1 statements to see how this progresses.
And then just starting to round things off a bit here, as you noted earlier on, this really shows that there's no break at all for industry deal makers. M&A is still as active as ever, even around what's usually a bit of a lull period for the industry and every other industry really around Christmas. This was a very late M&A in 2024. What do you reckon this indicates for 2025? Are we going to have just as much of an active year this year?
I'm going to solely talk on a European perspective. I think that in key markets, especially now that we're seeing kind of the regulatory settlement across kind of the UK, Italy, and even parts like France and Spain, I think that any business that has, market share or has a stable brand is up for grabs in the European space by the bigger operators or the bigger conglomerates. We always return back to just how hard it is for the bigger PLCs to secure market position, but also just to grow kind of revenues and earnings by a percentage. This is now a mature market. I think everyone kind of knows the realities of growth, but they also, I was talking to Marcus about this, it's like, I think kind of European M&A comes with a flavour of like, you know what you're getting out of these businesses and you know why you're executing these deals. I don't think that they're as venturous as what you get in other flavors, such as North America or South America. But I think kind of we're going to see a much more kind of pragmatic approach to M&A, and what I believe is going to be kind of the valuation of kind of the mid-sized enterprises that are remaining in Europe.
Okay, thank you very much, Ted. Yeah, very thorough breakdown of that. Thank you for looking into your crystal ball for us. We'll see how those predictions stack up. We could always place a bet on it if you want, see what happens.
Call me Mystic Ted, yes.
And I think that's it from us today. Obviously, two quite big developments for our listeners and our online readers to keep an eye on. The NHS's progress with the new remit it's got as a problem gambling treatment overseer, for want of a better term, I guess, in the UK, and what could prove to be yet again another interesting year in the M&A side of things. So I've been Ted. Thank you, Ted, for joining me. Thank you for all our listeners for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.